Hello, today we have the fourth lecture, and it looks like there will be 2 more lectures, maybe even 3, we'll see. Does anyone have any questions from last time? I'll just remind a little. So last time I drew this picture on the board. Did it bring up any questions for you? Again, this is just an obraz, a certain subjective model of the process of evolution. Today we are going to continue this topic, and today I will finally give the main definitions so that further we don't have misunderstanding.
Сегодня дам основные определения окончательно уже, чтобы у нас не было в дальнейшем непонимания. Еще раз, значит, это
So, this model of evolution
представляет собой модель
is a model of the measure of development of society.
Она задана свыше.
It is set objectively from above, regardless of our desire. The same model presents the main secret that was hidden from society, how society is governed through the triunity. The laying of the rope symbolizes the informational content of the measure. Measure, in Russian, mera, in Latin, matrix. So the concept of a matrix, or measure in Russian, it is the most important governorial concept in everything. The laying of the rope in this funnel symbolizes the informational content of the levels of development, or the process of evolution. It is otherwise called in different teachings the spiral of evolution. The spiral of evolution. In religious systems, it is God's providence. God's providence.
Тоже в прошлый раз давал, чтобы напомнить, потому что сегодня дальше мы будем продолжать эту тему.
Conditionally, again, the model of God's providence or the measure of development given from above is divided into direct providence, what is good, what is recommended from above, and allowance, what is not recommended, but allowed. I gave this the last time. Not recommended, but allowed. This is not depicted here. It is very difficult to depict. From birth, basically everyone is given a sense of measure. It is written how it's written here, on purpose, as they wrote it before the revolution. And here too, so as not to be confused with other names with the same root, such as smert, which means death, and so on. This is different. It is on the contrary what gives life. One might say eternal, because the soul is immortal. In this model there is no time. It is simply a certain process here. As soon as the informational level is filled, the society moves on to the next level. Therefore, the formula of development, according to the triunity, matter information changes to the measure of development set from above. The Quran confirms this. God created everything and measured it with a measure. Only the Quran gives such knowledge. There is no such thing in the Bible. In fact, there are some, but not so determinedly. He created everything and measured it with a measure. A thing, a substance, is matter. Measure is what is given from above, and information is what we pass on to each other from generation to generation. Culture. Culture is all information that is not transmitted genetically in a ready-to-use form. That is, in order to master the culture in general, you need to work hard. It is not obtained by inheritance. The term culture should be understood, first of all, as all that information, knowledge and theoretically non-formalized skills that exists in society but is not transmitted from generation to generation in a ready-to-use form based on the work of the genetic apparatus. Culture is transmitted from generation to generation on the basis of the relationship of people in society and on the basis of artifacts, monuments of culture, information carriers, which together constitute the cultural environment of society as a whole. From the animal world, man is distinguished by the genetic conditionality of the development in a certain age period of discrete thinking, abstract logical, articulate speech, and the ability to realize one's intentions in heterogeneous labor activities based on the foresight of various possibilities. It is possible that some more possibilities that have not yet been used are genetically determined. But it is these three factors, speech, thinking, including abstract logical, the ability to labor, some freedom of behavior from the dictates of instincts, that have become the main modern human culture. Culture is the bearer of another, except instincts, unconditioned and conditioned reflexes, type of behavioral information, socially conditioned information, which each person receives from the information environment of society. If culture is understood as a result of various non-genetically determined activities of generations of individuals of the species Homo sapiens, then it cannot be denied that the potential for man to master the environment is genetically determined, including through the development of culture. Along with the development of culture, the underlying social organization of the species Homo sapiens is genetically determined. Because of this, culture is initially and always one of the many factors in the global evolutionary process of the biosphere of the Earth. There is no good culture or bad, that is, unculturedness. There is a single, multifaceted culture, information that is not genetically transmitted from generation to generation. And in it, there are flaws of culture which pose a danger to the entire culture of mankind and the biological basis of culture, of the species Homo sapiens and the entire biosphere. In other words, this leads to the question of the objectiveness of dobro and evil, their difference and distinction. And the process of development of culture, a global historical process, is one of the particular processes of the global evolutionary process of the biosphere. The theory and practice of cognition in the culture of society must be given special attention because the effectiveness of the culture of cognition, in the sense of its ability to identify and solve problems in the life of society, its prevalence and reproduction in society in the continuity of generations, largely determine the prospects of societies, the possibility of development and choice of possibilities. Culture is also divided into substantial, substance in the meaning of an aggregate state of matter, and spiritual. This we will go through next time. There is a concept of spiritual culture, but no one can really give its definition, what it is. Substantial culture, this is understandable. You can touch it, you can see it, look out the window. Such is the culture, such is the way of life. And in essence, the informational filling of the levels of development of the spiral of evolution, it provides a change in culture. Not a type of culture, but a change in culture in general. I gave types of culture before. There are three types of culture. Once again, I'll say it very briefly. This is primitive communal type of culture, or otherwise a culture of communal magic. Or magic is based on the triunity. Matter and information changes according to measure. If you know exactly the measure, and you fill this measure with certain information, then the phenomenon materializes. This is the essence of any magic. If there is measure, fill it with information, a phenomenon or thing can materialize. In this way, judging by the reconstruction in the Holy Scriptures, the world was created. In the Bible, this is written in Genesis. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. God said, it materialized, and something substantial appeared. Because God knows exactly the measure, this is the way of His governance. In general, in this measure, everything is set in advance. Therefore, it is written in the sacred writings, in the Quran, God created everything and measured it with a measure. Any of our actions, our thoughts, are reflected in objective reality, in this providence. And to one degree or the other, they are either supported by this measure or not supported. And in such a way, God governs our possibilities given from above. It is impossible to go beyond the boundaries of God's providence. That is, this is what is actually impossible for a person. The whole range of possibilities, it is huge, is what is given from above. I gave it in more detail last time. Today we will move further in this regard. It just needs to be repeated to refer to it. I also gave culture. The next concept is worldview. Well, in general, by and large, as is the culture, so is the worldview of the people on average. Culture determines, in general and on the whole, the worldview, the average statistical worldview, with the exception of some deviations. Now we have a culture all over the world, despite the fact that society is divided into different denominations, religions. Nonetheless, our culture all over the world is dominated by the biblical one, the culture of the Bible. I've already said this more than once, why even in Islam, unfortunately, and Buddhism, in the East and the West, the culture of the Bible dominates all over the world, because the rules of communal life, they go beyond the framework of the traditional religions for those peoples who profess Islam and Buddhism, Taoism, and so on, and people live mainly according to the culture that the Bible prescribes. But this is how it is in our civilization. This is easy to prove in general. Social institutions correspond to what is written mostly in the Old Testament. Well, in the New Testament also. Even in those countries where the Bible is not a reference book for most believers, and non-believers too. Non-believers also have a culture of the Bible, because we live by the rules that are written in the Bible. Biblical culture, well, that means also the psyche of people in general is imprisoned by biblical obrazes. Not by chance, to all appearances. Already in the 7th century, when the Prophet Muhammad gave, in general, information that later became part of the Quran, many biblical episodes from the Bible got into the Quran, but they are interpreted there in a slightly different way. That is, if someone decides to read the Quran and the Bible, they will see there a lot of historical episodes about the same thing, but in a slightly different way. It is written about Moses there, it's written about Jesus, about many other things in the Quran too. Therefore, I've already said that the Quran, Islam, is called in science an Abrahamic religion, because all the prophets are listed there, starting from Abraham and ending with Muhammad. And the Quran says that all the prophets from above were given one and the same thing. This is the main thing. All the prophets, starting from Abraham, considered as the first ancestor of the Jews, and ending with Muhammad, were given one and the same thing from above. The Quran mentions this many times as a reminder. Then the question is, so why do people fight among themselves? Because of religions. Today we will be answering this question. This is a question of questions. And whether it can be that one and the same God, giving all the prophets one and the same thing, and many of them are listed there, would give rise to such a religious war on earth, or it is not from God. Worldview, a system of obrazes, in Russian obraz, in Latin information. Worldview is a system of obrazes or information that has been formed in the human psyche from birth to the present day. This is a shorter definition than it is in the textbook, a clearer one. That is, the system of obrazes that exists in the human psyche. This is the worldview. By this information, by this system of obrazes, a person is guided in life on basically all questions. When he encounters something, he makes decisions according to the system of obrazes. That is, if the worldview is biblical, then people draw stereotypes from the Bible. The secular culture, which now, at least in our country, has a third fulfillment, liberal democracy. The second fulfillment was Marxism-Leninism, and the first fulfillment, this is the Bible. Marxism-Leninism and liberal democracy are a derivative of the culture of the Bible, only of a secular nature. But in essence, they are one and the same algorithm. They are intended to preserve just such a structure of society, a pyramid. I already drew it. Where here we have the main ones, and then the crowd is already below, and from the crowd, all the riches converge upward. The culture of the Bible is purposed to preserve the crowd elite structure of society. Global Znacherhood at the top. It defines the worldview of everyone else. Once it was accepted, and then legitimized a few hundred years later, as the Old Testament and then the New Testament. But this does not fit in with the numerous assertions of the Quran that all the prophets were given one and the same thing. Because what was allegedly given to Moses and recorded in the Old Testament, and what was given to Jesus and recorded in the New Testament, at least take this and compare. These are two different things. Question: how to figure it out? What was given to Muhammad and recorded in the Quran also contradicts what is in the New Testament and the Old Testament. On the other hand, it is said that all prophets were given one and the same thing. Moreover, all the prophets were given that in the first place, such a structure of the world should not exist. Well, I already said when I gave the law of time, in general, God led people to the fact that this pyramid is collapsing. Therefore, the worldview is formed under the impact of several factors. The potential given from birth, through genetics, from parents. This is something along both family lines. This is the first factor. This is a certain potential only. Basically, the one who has more influence on the subsequent worldview of the child is the mother. The father has little influence on the upbringing of the child, especially in the first 3 years. And it is precisely in the first 3 years that everything is laid. That is precisely why the great Russian historian Vasily Osipovich Ключевsky, back in the 19th century, said a very interesting aphorism. The trouble with Russians is that they are good daughters, but bad mothers and wives. We do not know how to upbring. So the Jews know how to upbring, but they upbring not in a Russian way, and we don't know how to upbring in a Russian way. There is a lot standing behind this aphorism, because the main primary information, which then guides a person, is laid down even in the period before conception and the first 3 years. You have to prepare for conception. A man, in this respect, has much less influence on the spiritual and physical health of the future child. Of course, he influences, but as a rule, contrary to the established tradition, we are dealing with the fact that on average, a couple is chosen not by a man, but by a woman. This has been proven. It's not funny. It really has been proven. The woman is given the capability of doing this more effectively and discreetly. The man won't even notice. But this is a separate question, related to worldview. That is, the system of obrazes of the future person, the child, then already of an adult person, is formed, first, through genetic channels, along family lines, coming from both ancestors. This is potential. Whether this potential will be realized depends, I want to say it again, it depends more on the mother. And the realization of this potential directly depends, to a greater extent, on the first 3 years of upbringing of the child. There is even such a book that after 3 years old it is too late. The main thing is laid by the age of 3, even while the child cannot speak. But if the mother, of course, at this time is engaged in how to find more lovers for herself, she drinks, she smokes, and so on, well, it's clear that after that one should not be surprised at what grows up. These are very serious things, and the security and integrity of our country in the future depends on them. It is not by chance that they have resurfaced now, no longer in the form of aphorisms, but they are described in our books in more detail, why this is so. The next thing is that the worldview is further formed when the child draws obrazes, either in a finished form, a ready form, into his psyche, or they are formed through a system of concepts. When they learn something, it draws from the external environment. Well, now you yourself know what the external environment is like for the last 20 years. If you don't fall in with the wrong crowd on the street, then they can teach something wrong at home, because the parents themselves, as they say, don't know what is good, what is bad. After that, they wonder why the child did not grow up the way they wanted. What you put in is what you get later. It begins to manifest itself somewhere in the period from 7 to 15 years. So the worldview mainly depends on these two factors. After the advent of television, ready-made obrazes can be laid directly into the psyche to unconscious levels, bypassing consciousness. When he watches, for example, turns it on, pornography is shown there. And if a very small child, then Disney cartoons are shown, which are also very harmful. They are specially sent here from the United States so that our children get the worldview that is needed by them. Ready-made obrazes already fall on the psyche of the child, and then he reproduces them in life, faced with certain circumstances. In the minds of adult Russians, a cartoon is something that is a priori intended for children. But why are more and more parents having doubts about the safety and benefits for their children of foreign cartoons? Where does this oppressive feeling of anxiety come from? when we see our children watching foreign cartoons? Where does the suspicion come from that at this moment something wrong and irreparable is going on? We will try to turn these doubts into absolute certainty. Most of the production of the American Dream Factory conveyor for children, for our children, is not harmless. And the little that remains can be watched only under the parental censorship and with parental commentary. Otherwise, it will not be you who upbrings your children. And can you imagine our grandmothers and great-grandmothers trusting someone unfamiliar with this most important part of upbringing, telling fairy tales to children? Then why today millions of parents allow their children to watch cartoons that they have not watched themselves, about the authors of which they know nothing, and the purpose of these authors is also unknown? After all, a fairy tale is what forms a model of the world around in the child's mind. Obrazes of mom and dad, friend and enemy, good and evil, all that he will be guided by all his life, like a spiritual compass. By the way, whether your child will care for you in your old age or hand you over to a nursing home also depends on your upbringing, including the fairy tales that you told him and the cartoons you allowed him to watch. The child perceives almost all information in the form of obrazes. From these obrazes, as from blocks, the child builds his own model of the world. And the most important block of this picture is the obraz of a woman, a young lady, a girl. Looking at cartoon heroines, girls absorb stereotypes of future sexual behavior. And in boys, a matrix is formed. They will unconsciously strive when choosing a life partner, the mother of their future children. And this is not so much about appearance, but rather about inner, spiritual qualities, the reflections of which are the external manner of action of cartoon heroines. We watched kilometers of American cartoons, recorded hundreds of episodes where female heroines act, and showed all this to a child psychologist. The psychologist was shocked at what she saw, and we were shocked by her verdict. It turns out that the heroine of most American cartoons is designed in such a way that the systematic viewing of tapes with their participation by children leads to the extinction of the function of procreation. This is achieved in the following way. The obraz of a woman is deprived of romance and mystery by endowing it with adult realism, physicality and cruelty. Along the way, female qualities traditional for the Russian society are devalued and ridiculed. The very ones that glorify our good old domestic cartoons: chastity, shyness, selflessness, modesty, and motherhood as such. What foreign, mostly American cartoons do to our children can be summed up in a short formulation: intellectual corruption. These are not my words. This is the opinion of a professional child psychologist. We will talk about the mechanics of changing the child's psyche through the substitution of obrazes. These means are so simple, so often found in foreign cartoons, and so obvious, that one involuntarily wonders how this passes the attention of adults without encountering opposition. Due to the lack of airtime, we will not be able to counter each negative phenomenon of the Western cartoon industry with a counterexample from domestic animation. But if you are not too lazy, do it yourself from memory. And you will see that the cultures that gave birth to these cartoons are going in different directions. Let's go from simple to complex. Color. The main heroine is painted in bright, poisonous colors. This technique exploits the properties of the child's psyche to respond to all the brightest. Thus, from the beginning to the end of the video, the attention of the child is riveted to the character who leads the viewer wherever he wants, without giving him the opportunity to be distracted and reflect. Therefore, in particular, very young children drop everything when there is an advertisement on the screen and watch it as if spellbound. Well, let's move on. The face. It doesn't take a genius to notice that the main characters of all American cartoons look the same. Not only is it plain boring, but if you imagine these features on a living young woman, then she will turn out to be ugly. However, due to the frequency of the flashing of this face on the screen, it turns into an acquired aesthetic stereotype. Thus, girls will strive to look like something that does not exist, and boys growing up will search in vain for something that cannot be in this world at all. Do you think they will find each other? This is the process of creating a new matrix of beauty, replacing beauty with freakness. On the other hand, it is the embodied in cartoons, general tendency of the entire Western world towards uniformity and simplification. Food, drink, aspirations, thoughts, female beauty. In Russian history, such a process was called totalitarianism and was condemned worldwide. Why should cartoon totalitarianism expect a different fate? By the way, the heroine from the Disney Brothers and other conveyors of identical dreams not only looks the same, but they say the same words, the same way, they act in the same way. There is the impression that they unanimously repeat what they saw on TV in the same way as our children. But meanwhile, a unified obraz of the main positive heroine is a dangerous thing. Judge for yourself. We draw a mass-market beauty, which the child identifies as dobrous and good, because he was taught to do this. The child knows that the dobrous and good must be imitated. And then we go and stick to this obraz any old abomination, such as lust, cruelty, disrespect for parents, and who knows what else. And on the positive obraz of the heroine, these parasites will enter the child's soul unnoticed, begin to govern it. We are dealing with the greatest invention of mass consciousness processing technology, a universal subconscious visual module without a sign of good and evil. This is a bright package with dangerous contents. I have in my hands a copy of a magazine for computer game lovers. On page 15 there is a picture that you will now see on your screens. This is an advertisement for erotic computer games for older children, where Vovechka, fatigued from his sexual exploits, just wants to sleep, but gets into the land of erotic nightmares. He's surrounded by special girls with the faces of cartoon princesses. In my opinion, this is the next stage of the intellectual molestation of minors prepared by cartoons. Although I may be wrong, you are the parents. It is for you to decide. The simplest example of how harmful content is put into beautiful packaging is endowing the romantic heroine, the one whom the child sympathizes with and imitates, with attributes of anger, malice, and cruelty. For example, can you imagine Nastyenka from The Scarlet Flower with an expression of anger or rage on her face? Could she bare her teeth at all, just being aggressive? But it is quite possible for the Gypsy in The Hunchback of Notre Dame, and many others too. Can you imagine the Frog Princess fighting like a man? But Jasmine in Aladdin or the Troll in Shrek do it not simply habitually, but cruelly, and with relish. They make it fun and contagious. But today it is one of the most popular cartoons among children. The masculinization of women in American cartoons for children leads to a confusion of the role of the sexes in life, which under certain conditions in the future may cause a deeper sexual disorientation in young people.
А теперь ты сомневаешься во мне?
Мужчина ты или женщина, все равно. Здесь новый для нас мир, и нам нужно многому научиться всем.
Например, к отношению к женщинам.
The unisex youth style is, to a certain extent, continuation of the cartoon unisex. And take notice how the romantic heroine loses her female characteristics and behaves not just like a man, but like Superman. The apotheosis of this process is fantastic cartoons about robots or mummies. There, outwardly remaining a woman, the heroine is not just a man by role, not just Superman, but a native of hell, a demon. And now about sadism and betrayal in its purest form. You have certainly seen this episode from Shrek, and you have probably seen how the children laughed while watching. So you yourself have witnessed how a shift in consciousness is achieved, how strangers change the psyche of your children before your eyes. It is not just a beautiful murder scene, it's a devaluation of death. This episode crosses out the entire system of children's ideas about the world. The main positive heroine of our fairy tales cannot be treacherous, she cannot be cruel, she cannot kill. Remember how Nastyenka from The Scarlet Flower sings about a little nightingale, the Russian symbol of romance and love. And what does the troll do with the nightingale and her offspring? The heroes of Shrek came from a world where God's gift is fried eggs. After that, killing a frog and a snake for the sake of entertainment seems innocent. In fact, this is a romantic attribute of an anti-fairy tale. A fairy tale where not a frog becomes a princess, but a princess turns into a green evil spirit. And this evil spirit is the romantic heroine of the anti-fairy tale. The anti-heroine is accompanied by anti-romantic metaphors in the course of the plot. The murder of a frog, a snake, a bird, in the same way as normal romantic heroines of our cartoons are accompanied by the singing of a nightingale and the flowering of the earth. And now, from hatred, cruelty, betrayal, and mug punchery, we will smoothly move on to cartoon sex. I emphasize that we are talking about cartoons for children. Recall Vasilisas, Alyonushkas, princesses, and other heroines of traditional domestic cartoons. They do not even pretend to be realistic. They are conditional and airy. Their female attributes are only outwardly indicated. Their femininity is expressed rather through spiritual qualities. This is what a dream looks like in a child's view. Their American counterparts, on the contrary, are realistic, physiological, and have perfectly developed forms of adult women who know how to use these forms. Of course, you will laugh at this word, but in the behavior of American cartoon characters there is no chastity, which is what distinguishes TV production for children from films for adults. Look, showing sympathy for the opposite sex, the cartoon maidens openly flirt, are not shy, they don't lower their eyes to the bottom. These are jaded women, of everyone knows what kind of behavior, who seduce in a well-versed, vulgar and concrete way. And the face of the heroine at this moment is not the mirror of the soul, as it should be, but a functional part of the body. You remember, yes, that children automatically copy the behavior of the heroine. Now, touching and kissing. In our cartoons, the biggest erotica is the holding of hands by the heroes. The kiss is intimate. Its physical side is hidden from the eyes of the little viewers. The kiss is only indicated. In foreign cartoons, everything is for show, like it is with adults. Lips are open and lustful. You can touch a woman as you like some regular old thing. Here the hunchback of Notre Dame holds the gypsy in the pose of a sacrificial animal. Here Shrek drags his girlfriend like a bag, and then flirts with her in a way that one does not flirt with a decent woman. But she likes it. In our cartoons, heroines are not dragged. They are not beaten, they are not grabbed in whichever place, because it is not feminine, it is not chaste. According to psychologists, there exist cartoons for little ones where open erotica is shown. Here, for example, is a popular anthropocentric cartoon where animals play people, Tom and Jerry. The behavior of the female cat is an encyclopedia of the behavior of a vulgar street woman, candid erotic poses, this one for example, the butt to the sky, leg raised, or this one of the most adult poses, a man's head on a woman's lap. This position suggests sexual relations among adults. Separately we note the behavior of the cat, because he shows the boy viewers how to behave with a woman. He demonstrates extreme boorishness, and the female cat demonstrates how boorishness should be accepted favorably. The given stereotype of behavior from the point of view of a psychologist, if a child absorbs the stereotype, further excludes relationships of love, respect, and marriage between the sexes, replacing them with the stereotype of sexual partnership. Sexual partnership, returning to the beginning of our conversation, does not presuppose the creation of a family, the continuation of the family. From the point of view of child psychologists, adult stereotypes of behavior, in particular erotica, must not be shown in children's cartoons. This prematurely disinhibits the sphere of inclinations in the child, for which the child is not yet ready functionally and morally physically. These experiences will not have a normal outlet and will cripple the child's psyche. In the future, this will result in sexual problems, difficulties with creating a family, and procreation. These cartoons provoke interest in children, which is still supposed to sleep for a long time and soundly. Therefore, pedophiles are responsible for the physical molestation of our children, and Western cartoons are responsible for the moral one. According to all the same child psychologists, for the normal development of a child during the period of the first interest in the opposite sex, he needs a fairy tale, a riddle, a mystery. Only through romance and timidity in front of the opposite sex can a boy become a real man. Only a modest, chaste and shy girl is able to attract real men, and not freaks from cartoons that cities are teeming with today. Children's modesty and shyness is an indispensable condition for creating a family and procreation in the future. The problem is so serious. Our children are being bombarded so massively with non-childish obrases that there is a mass phenomenon in children that psychologists have called romantic hunger. They need a princess from a childhood dream, and they are slipped in unfresh hussy. They need romance, love and a dream, and they are inundated with sexual impurities.
Белоснежка и 7 гномов, Золушка. Я смотрела мультфильм «Белоснежка», «Алиса в стране чудес» и «Винни-Пух». Красную шапочку, спящая красавица, красавица и чудовище. Я все смотрю, которые по телевизору идут, но иногда пропускаю. Джим Баттон, Том и Джерри.
Проект Z, это Бэтмен, это Джим Баттон.
Иностранные, они хорошо нарисованы.
Ну, Марсиане, Симпсоны, ну, Винни-Пух, когда есть.
Шрек, Симпсоны, Аленький цветочек.
Там Спирит или Шрек, Лила и Стич.
Не советский больше, по душе.
The chief, the most sacred, the most important obraz of a woman for a child in the fairy tales of all peoples of the world is the obraz of the mother. When we began to look for it in American cartoons, we came across something stunning. Mom, motherhood, the poetry of motherhood in all its traditional form is shown only in cartoons about animals, such as The Lion King, The Jungle Book, Dumbo, 101 Dalmatians. Touching, sentimental, and very Dobria scenes of maternal care for cubs, puppies, elephants, and other cubs. But when it comes to cartoons about people, or those where animals play people, just judge for yourself. You will experience, as they say, true disgust. Take, for example, the mother duck from Metro Golden Mayer. A completely degraded, marginal creature that shows her underwear to her husband. This is how alcoholic women look and behave in real life. Her voice, mannerisms, gestures are not maternal. She even holds her child like a glass. Her posture does not protect the child. It is easy to compare what we see with our grey-necked duck, and in both places there is the obraz of the mother. But in young viewers, they form diametrically opposite attitudes towards their own mothers. In American cartoons, we have not come across a single mother of a person who would be young, full of strength, beautiful, causing the desire to imitate in little spectatresses. They are all repulsive. Take at least these characters from the cartoon Goof Troop. Middle-aged, ugly, apathetic, inhibited, with freakish figures. And another common technique is when the mother is drawn in the form of a quite good-looking but old woman. In our cartoons, grandmothers are drawn like this. And now we will show you what is called the 25th frame, a visual obraz that appears on the screen for a very short time, and consciousness does not have time to evaluate it critically. Such obrazes are usually written directly into the subconscious as a hypnotic suggestion. Cartoon Beauty and the Beast. Did you understand anything? Then let's look at it frame by frame. A middle-aged, ugly woman with features distorted by irritation and hatred. And in her arms you can't immediately make out whether it's pigs or human babies. A more disgusting and unattractive obraz of the mother cannot be imagined, because it is combined with the appearance of an angry sow. A believer would say that this is an infernal parody of the Mother of God. And in the background, above all this and on top of all of this, the beautiful heroine can be seen. This metaphor instills in girls an aversion to motherhood in general, and to having many children in particular. Either you want to become the same ugly, old and poor, then be a mother, or forever young and beautiful, then don't even give birth. Girls are as if offered a choice which is in fact not a choice, because the decision is forcibly, disguisedly embedded in the subconscious. Obrazes of a woman. These are obrazes of a future mother and wife. And precisely this is how they should be imprinted in the memory. And not only in the consciousness, but also in the subconscious of the child, both the boy and the girl. For a girl, this is a role model, and for a boy, this is a model that he must choose in the future. How can such a woman arouse anything other than rough attraction? I repeat, at best. And in the worst case, it only causes disgust for the female sex, and for the family, and for life in general. Because if life is inhabited by such female creatures, then such a life is bleak, unpromising. A hopeless life in which a woman does not continue the race. Children love watching cartoons, but parents know from experience that not everything that children like is good for them. For example, in early childhood they like to stick their fingers into the socket, touch fire, put needles in their mouths. You saved your children from all this. So why do millions of Russians calmly watch how their children are crippled by cartoons? After all, the child has the right to childhood, doesn't he? That is, a worldview is a system of obrazes that exists in the human psyche today. All information is encoded in the human psyche in a special way, not in the way that it is encoded for our understanding. It is encoded there according to the system set from above. Scientists are studying this system, but have not fully studied it, because the system of codes there is especially complex at the level of the psyche in general. How it is encoded, and information is also processed in something the same way as with a computer, or something like a hard drive, but everything is much more complicated there. and the codes, completely different. They are naturally set. The next, connected with this, is world understanding. Worldview is a broader concept. It's a broader thing than world understanding. We even feel, that is, in our psyche there is a huge amount of information that may not reach the level of understanding. We do not understand. Therefore, it is believed that the psyche, even one's own, to say nothing about someone else's psyche, is a black box. What is laid there in the course of life is best known by parents and the person himself sometimes. But parents do not think about this, and God. No one else knows what is going on in the psyche of a person. You can guess by actions, by reactions to some stimuli how he will behave, but the person understands much less from what he has in his worldview, because this is already a level of consciousness. We will go through this a little bit later. World understanding is connected with yet another term. This is concept. A concept is the determinus of a connection defined between a word or a set of words, a phrase, and an obraz that arises in the psyche of a person.
Либо набором слов, фразой. И образом, который возникает в психике человека. Если вы слышите,
If you hear what is being said to you, there arises in you some obraz. Some word was said, an obraz appeared.
то есть вы поняли, о чем
That is, you understood what was being said.
поскольку слово либо
Since a word or a set of words is a code,
код. Понятие
a concept is directly related to the encoding of information.
информации.
Any information can be encoded,
Информация может быть закодирована. Но чтобы
but in order for this to be understood, for it to reach the level of understanding,
понимание,
it is necessary that when pronouncing some words,
при произнесении каких-то слов
a certain obraz given by these words must necessarily arise.
образ. То есть
That is, a concept is a direct connection
связь между словом,
between a word,
набором
a set of words,
и образом.
and an
Еще
obraz.
более широкая.
An even broader definition of a concept is the connection between the code,
Потому что код
because the code can be not only through the language, codes can be different,
и
and the obraz that arises in the human psyche.
ну, как
As an example in this regard, a very useful example can be given.
очень полезные примеры. Вот я вам скажу,
I'll tell you right now.
ручка.
Ruchka,
У вас образ
the one that you write with. What obraz do you have? This one here,
на двери, еще другая.
and there on the door there is another ruchka,
Есть вот-
and there is this.
То есть
There is
одного
one
слова
word is not
недостаточно,
enough to convey information.
чтобы передать информацию.
One word,
Одного
ruchka,
слова,
is not enough to
ручка,
convey
чтобы
information.
передать информацию.
Pishushaya ruchka,
Пишущая
a
ручка.
writing pen,
Два слова.
2 words, a code. That is already something like
Вот
that.
примерно что-то такое. Но чтобы описать
But to describe the accuracy of a writing pen, you need to describe the length, diameter, the color,
есть.
and sometimes you have to write a whole page
Для
for
этого
this.
целую страницу надо написать иногда. То есть, чтобы
That is,
возник точный
in order for an exact
иногда
obraz to
нужно
appear,
целую книгу
sometimes you need to write a whole book.
закодировать.
Encode an obraz, you need to write a whole book. This is also the triunity.
Вот это все,
So all this, diameter, length, these are particular measures.
они
They are encoded.
через
They can be encoded through a language, they can be encoded through other languages, a mathematical language. This is also a language.
И
And
тогда
then, when transmitting
при
an exact
передаче
measure,
точной
an exact
меры
obraz appears in your
возникает
psyche.
точный образ у вас в психике. И вы себе
And you imagine this
представляете
thing.
эту вещь. Если
If the
обратно
reverse
говорить,
process is going
я
on,
говорил,
I have already talked about this.
знаете
you know
точную
the
меру
exact measure,
и
and you
заполняете
fill
ее
it with
информацией
already your own information,
своей, то
then
это явление
this
в
phenomenon
организме
materializes,
несколько обратно.
a somewhat reverse process.
То есть
That
для
is,
того,
in
чтобы
order for an obraz to
возник
appear in the
чувствительный
psyche,
образ,
there
должно
must
быть
be a
очень
very
точное,
accurate encoding of
точное
information, an
кодирование
exact
информации,
obraz.
точный образ. Вы
You know,
знаете, для того,
in order to
чтобы
encode some
закодировать
pictures on the internet on a material
на
carrier,
материальном
what
носителе
size it
какую-то
is,
картинку в интернете, сколько
how many
записок,
characters are needed,
сколько нужно знаков, то есть
that is, how many characters are needed in order to encode a serious picture, and even in good quality,
в хорошем качестве. А фильм
and a film.
не каждый
Not everyone
из
probably
каждого
even has
телефона
equipment yet at
должно
home
быть
so that they can watch a
автомат,
film online at
чтобы
least.
можно было
It does not
смотреть
work.
фильм
So a
онлайн.
huge number of characters, a code in order for the image to come to life.
Код для того, чтобы изображение ожило. Когда
When the image comes to
оживает,
life, it somehow materializes on your screen.
материализуется у вас на экране. Когда
When the
первые
first
фильмы
films appeared,
появились,
when they showed their steam locomotive riding towards the audience, everyone there left their seats and ran away.
они боялись,
They were afraid that it was really going.
сейчас мы к этому
Now we are
привыкли.
used to
Вот
it.
это и есть
This is
материализация.
materialization through the triunity. Information is
Информация
encoded,
кодируется,
transmitted at a
передается в состояние,
distance,
а потом
and then
материализуется.
materialized elsewhere.
Вот пример.
So this is an example of the triunity at work.
Но для того, чтобы
But in order to
хотя бы одно
convey at
изображение
least one
передать
image, a
серьезно,
serious picture,
нужно
you need to give a huge
огромное
amount
количество,
of, roughly speaking,
говоря, слов
words
на
in the coding
языке
language.
кодирования дать. Вот понятие
So the concept
то же
is the
самое.
same.
Чтобы в
In order for an
точности
exact obraz to arise in the psyche, sometimes you need not one word, but at least several. Otherwise, there will be no understanding.
о чем мы говорим, иначе будет не
I'll
будет
say
понимания.
ruchka,
Я скажу
and there can be a lot of obrazes for this word. It needs to be clarified.
К этому слову очень много образов. Нужно уточнить. То есть
That is, a
понятие
concept is a
взаимного
mutual correspondence between a word
между словом и
and an obraz that arises in the psyche of the person.
человека. Но
But a concept is a very serious thing in general.
понятие,
Society is governed through the concept.
понятие управляется социумом.
Society is governed through the system of concepts.
Понятие управляется общество. И поэтому
And therefore,
миропонимание
world understanding is narrow.
уже это
It is a narrower thing than a worldview.
чем мировоззрение, это система понятий, которые
It is a system of concepts that exist in the human
система
psyche.
понятий гораздо
The system of concepts is much smaller in volume than the system of obrazes.
система образов. Мы понимаем далеко
We
не
understand
всё.
far from everything.
Если
If you dig into yourself, you probably sometimes even catch yourself thinking, why are you doing something, but you don't want to do it?
вы,
Does it
наверное,
happen?
иногда некоторые
I don't want to, but I do. Or I want to, but I can't do
что вы
it.
что-то делаете, а делать это не хотите. Бывает такое? Не хочу,
This
но
is how
делаю.
the psyche works. Such is a
Не хочу, но не
worldview.
могу сделать. Вот так работает психика. Такое мировоззрение. Вы
You turn to your
обращаетесь,
worldview, and it does not give the answer you want.
оно
Either
дает
there is no
ответ,
concept, someone addresses you, they say something you don't understand,
либо понятия нету. К вам обращаются, говорят что-то, вы не понимаете.
Kazma Prutkov said that many things are incomprehensible to us, not because our concepts are weak, but because these things are not included in the circle of our concepts. If we give a new concept, then we will expand the circle of our concepts. Security depends on this, depending on which direction, however, to expand it.
Ну и как идет
Well, how is the process of governing society going?
общество? В статистике принято вот
The
такая,
following charts are accepted in statistics. They are given for many reasons.
очень по многим поводам.
The normal distribution of people,
Людей,
the number of people,
количество людей,
the normal distribution of people according to some parameters.
каким-то параметрам. Поскольку у нас предмет
Since our subject is theological,
философский, и
and today the question is, What is istina, truth, in general?
есть истина, то мы рассмотрим
Then we will consider the distribution of people
распределение людей
according to the following parameters: dobro and evil.
а графически
And the graph generally holds over time. Again,
сохраняется
where does dobro and evil come from?
добро и зло. Есть мнение,
There is an opinion that the liberal intelligentsia is especially struck by it.
она всегда была,
It has always been liberal.
это заметил еще вообще поэт,
It was also noticed many Russian poets also write in obrazes, in poems, very serious things.
очень серьезные вещи.
With the help of this thesis, in general, the Soviet Union was destroyed.
Был разрушен Советский Союз,
In particular,
что добро и зло не познаваемо.
that dobro and evil are not cognizable.
Познаваем,
The world is not cognizable.
многие знания
It is useless to
многие
try.
печали, это
Much knowledge, many sorrows.
Ветхий Завет.
This is the Bible and the Old Testament Ecclesiastes.
Искать.
One should not persist at all,
Нужно жить
should not look for criteria for dobro and evil.
в основном
One must live, go with the flow, and basically observe.
свобода, это интеллигенция.
Well, freedom.
Либерализм это свобода.
Freedom is the intelligentsia, liberalism is freedom if translated.
Чуть позже тоже.
I spoke already about freedom, a little later too again.
Тогда
And there are even poems
кто скажет, что
that whoever says that he knows what is best, do not believe him, drive him away, he is lying, he does not know what is best. This is Galich.
премьер-министр, например,
And the Prime Minister, for example, of the Soviet Union, Nikolai Ryzhkov, he was very fond of this poem by Galich.
премьер-министр,
The Prime Minister is the second person, or even the first,
мы не знаем.
and we don't know what's best. But why did you go there then? One might ask.
Откуда берутся критерии
So the Soviet Union
добра
collapsed.
и зла?
Where do the criteria for dobro and evil come from?
Подсказка. Висит.
Well, here immediately there is a hint.
Нравственные
Ravi's criteria are set from above.
критерии добра и
The
зла.
criteria for dobro and evil are set from above.
В Коране
It is no coincidence that again in the Quran, the last holy scripture chronologically, which is given to us for study,
нам для
it is said
учения сказано, что все
that all the prophets from above were given one and the same thing. This is a question of questions.
почему
Why then did the religion split?
критерии добра
The criteria for dobro and evil are taken from God's providence,
из общей
from the universal measure.
заданы эти
These particular measures, in relation to each phenomenon,
каждого
are set from above.
время заданы свыше. И
And the last time I said there is such a thing, a sense of measure.
чувство
From there, the criteria for dobro and evil are taken.
добра и зла.
If there is no sense of measure,
Чувства меры нету, и оно
if it has not developed from childhood, but is choked by alcohol, by tobacco, ecology,
экологии, то, что
the fact that the mother especially, in the first place, does not love,
любви относится к
she relates to upbringing without love,
думает не о том,
but thinks about the wrong things,
и прочее.
and so on and so
То
forth.
чувство меры
Then the sense of measure given to a child, the child is open when he is born, he is open to the world, and what is laid in him he does not like, he cries, resists everything else, and especially if you approach this without love. It turns out that the sense of measure is dulled, then it already disappears somewhere, driven into the second, third priorities, and a person is lost in life. He does not know what is good and what is bad. This is a violation of security, safety, of course, because good and bad, it is given only from above. The same Chuchev, Fyodor Ivanovich, wrote well about this, second half of the 19th century, about the sense of measure in general. It has to do with this. There is such a poem. He has many interesting ones. Nature is not what you would have it. No lifeless cast, no mask of death. In nature there is love and freedom, a soul, a tongue, a living breath. So a tongue, this is a language. God speaks to everyone, constantly, in a language that the person needs to understand. But since the attributes of culture are designed to take care of making sure this doesn't happen, if a person does not know the sense of measure, does not feel the measure, then that's it. You see a tree, its leaves and blossom. The gardener stuck them there, no doubt. The growing fetus, is it molded by alien forces from without? They live unseeing and unhearing about those who do not have a sense of measure. In this world, as if plunged in gloom, from distant suns they sense no breathing, no life within the waves' white spume. In their dead heart no spring has blossomed. Their soul sees not the heavenly light. For them the forests have not spoken, and mute is all the star-filled night, and agitating streams and forests, in tongues that owe no earthly source. With them the thunderstorm has never by night held friendly intercourse. Yet who will blame them? Can a deaf mute conceive the organ's depth and reach? Alas, no sound his soul will quicken, not even his own mother's speech. Tchutchev has many such poems, that people have lost their sense of measure in life, and the existing culture helps to do this. And then it means both dobro and evil. But the first experiment in this regard was set up by those very same globalizers. About the global scenario, I'm unlikely to have time, but it comes from ancient Egypt, the system that is at the top. They make sure that if a person is born with a sense of measure, that for him it does not develop further, that he does not feel dobro and evil. And the first experiment was set, however sad it is, this is a sad fact, in relation to the ancient Jews. It is written in the Old Testament, the book of Numbers, the Pentateuch of Moses, the bulk of the Old Testament. The Mosaic Pentateuch, or in Hebrew the Torah, Tanakh in Hebrew, Torah is abbreviated. The book Numbers, chapter 14, verses 20 and 22. Well, I won't tell the story of the Exodus from Egypt, and then the stay of the Jews in the desert. 42 years they were there. This can be read again in the Old Testament. But so-called God, in this chapter of Numbers, chapter 14, verses 20 and 22, said, "Only those who do not distinguish between dobro and evil will come out of the wilderness. To everyone else I will not give the land that I promised." This doctrine has been spreading all over the world for 3,000 years, so that people do not distinguish between objective criteria of dobro and evil. They do surrogates. Already for about 30 years, 20 years at least, they are telling us that sex is good. For good health, please, go ahead. And now there are a lot of drugs to prolong pleasure. In fact, it is very dangerous for the health of the nation, for the preservation of a genetically healthy core. It is prohibited in Islam. Alcohol is the same thing. They say, it's normal, the culture's like that. A Russian cannot live without alcohol. In fact, there was still absolute sobriety 1,000 years ago. In Islam there is also a ban on alcohol, that they now, Muslims who are believers, follow at least somehow the traditions of Islam. These prohibitions come from the Quran. Prohibitions on fornication, on alcohol, on fortune-telling there is a ban. You can't tell fortunes. A person must always determine from the level of consciousness what he should do, and not ask someone, even more so a fortune-teller. And there is a ban on drawing lots on many things. That is, there are objective criteria in the Quran. Part of the objective criteria to some extent got into the last scripture, which cannot be said about the Bible. But the Old Testament is, of course, a doctrine, a global doctrine, of preserving this here pyramid, the power. Because here at the top is only Jews. This is a fact, and this fact can now be seen by turning on any TV channel, looking at the leadership of anything in this case, science, culture, trade, and so on and so forth. But this doesn't mean that that's it. They cannot move further because they've come up against this law of time and other factors. There are many prognoses that that's it, that this is the end of the biblical conception. But once again, clearly expressed, moreover, a text that does not know dobro and evil in this one was deleted, but then restored in Greek translation. In the time of Alexander the Great, it was made in the 3rd century when the Old Testament, what was then, was first translated into Greek. It was restored, and the Russian, so to speak, Bible, it contains an already restored translation, where this is written. There is a lot more written there. Again, this is what? So that there is no sense of measure, in order to draw on a criteria what is good and what is bad. Well, for the Jews, this is the Holy Scripture. This is the Torah, that is the Old Testament, the Talmud, Kabbalah, and the rabbis. For the Christians, this is the New Testament, plus a bunch of everything there, all sorts of legends. For Muslims, this is the Quran, Sunnahs, and so on. And all this contains only some fragments of the truth. As experience has shown, why all the prophets were given one and the same thing, and after them, completely different things remained. So here in this graph, there is a certain worldview among people that exists today. An average worldview that the majority of the population has received. Here it is shaded. This is the total, the integral, the number of people. In science, among statisticians, this is called under the hump of normal distribution. Well, let's put it like this. 90% of people, for simplicity, are under the hump of normal distribution, have an average worldview, like this, as it is now. Work, home, beer in the evening, a lover a couple of times a week, a little bit of different sex a couple of times, a good old booze up, or a dacha on the weekends, and so on, and this kind of thing. Such a worldview. They don't especially think about what is good and what is bad. What is pleasant, they think about this. 90%. And these are people. Laws and legislation are written for them. They vote for this legislation and for the representatives of the authorities. They elect representatives of the authorities. Then we don't like something, but in principle the laws are written mainly for them. They are normal. This is considered normal. These people are normal. 90% statistically under the hump of the normal distribution. This is the hump. This is how they are distributed. Well, it's clear that sometimes someone even ends up in the pokey. There are all sorts of perverts, murderers. These are not even criminals, but evildoers. Because crime and viciousness are different things.
Преступность и порочность – это разные вещи.
Evildoers cannot be called criminals because evildoers broach the law in the same way as the pravious also broach the law.
Как и праведники тоже приступают к закону. Потому что закон
The law is written for these. Over here we have the pravious.
кто читал
Who read the New
Новый
Testament?
Завет, кто
Who
вообще
even has
имеет
anything to
какое-то
do with
отношение
orthodoxy?
к
Who was
православию?
Jesus Christ?
Кем был Иисус Христос?
Where can he be put here?
Писать здесь. Он был праведник,
He was a pravious
он был
one,
преступник.
but he was a criminal.
Потому что преступники могут
Criminals
быть
can be
здесь и
here
здесь.
and they can be here. In relation to the laws of the Roman authorities, in relation to the laws of the Jewish Sanhedrin, the highest Jewish religious authority, the Jews were pushing the Roman procurator, a representative of the Roman authorities, so that he would execute Jesus. He was a criminal. Therefore, criminals cannot be put down here. They can be here and they can be here. There are fewer here. These obey the laws. They live like everyone else, normal. Praviousness and crime are two different things. There is a proverb, not sinful before God, not guilty before the Tsar. So Jesus acted according to the principle, not sinful before God, not guilty before the Tsar. That is, if he is guided by the laws from above, then the laws here, in principle, if necessary, can be violated, the ones which are established in this or that state. It is not recommended to do this, but the person came with a preaching. He was told that he was to die, because his words did not fit into the Jewish canons, and they made him a criminal. But that doesn't mean that he is an evildoer. That is, he was from here, and these ones are the normal ones. I will not tell the story from the New Testament, how everything turned out there. Pontius Pilate, the representative of the Roman power, did not want to put him to death. He wanted to let him go. But after the third time, the representative of the supreme religious body of the Jews, Caiaphas, 3 times insisted that he be executed. And only after that, when he said that Jesus allegedly encroached on the place of the Jewish king, and this is practically an encroachment on the highest position in the Roman Empire, then there was a governor. Then he had to agree.
Я рассмотрел дело Иешуа Ганоцри и утвердил смертный приговор. Таким образом, к смертной казни приговорены 3 преступников – Дисмос, Гестас, Варраван и, кроме того, этот Иешуа Ганоцри. Первые 2 числятся за прокуратором, и поэтому речь о них идти не будет. 2 же последних, Варраван и Ганоцри, схвачены местные власти и осуждены Синедрионом. Согласно закону, одного из них надо будет отпустить в честь наступающего великого праздника Пасхи. Я желал бы знать, кого из 2 преступников намерен освободить Синедрион. Варравана или Ганоцри?
Синедрион просит отпустить Варравана.
Признаться, этот ответ меня удивил. В данном случае налицо явная ошибка. Преступления Варравана и Ганоцри несопоставимы по тяжести. Если Иешуа просто сумасшедший, то Варраван отягощен гораздо значительней. Он позволил себе прямые призывы к мятежу, убил стража. В связи с этим я прошу первосвященника пересмотреть решение. и оставить на свободе того, кто менее вреден. А таким, без сомнения, является Ганоцри. Итак,
Синедрион внимательно ознакомился с делом и вторично сообщает, что намерен освободить Варавана.
как? Даже после моего ходатайства? Ходатайство того, в чьем лице говорит римская власть? Повтори в третий раз, первосвященник.
И в третий раз мы сообщаем, что освобождаем Варавана.
Так знай же, первосвященник, что не будет тебе отныне покоя. Ни тебе, ни народу твоему. Это я тебе говорю. Пилат Понтийский. Нет, Каифа, слишком много ты жаловался кесарю на меня. Теперь настал мой час. Теперь полетит весть от меня, как вы заведомых мятежников прячете от смерти. Увидишь ты не одну когорту в Ершалаиме, нет. Подойдет легион Фульмината, подойдет арабская конница, вот тогда услышишь ты громкий плач и стенание. Вспомнишь ты тогда спасенного Варравана и пожалеешь, что послал на смерть философа с его мирной проповедью.
Веришь ли ты сам тому, что сейчас говоришь? Не мир принес нам обольститель народа в Ершалаим. И ты, всадник, это прекрасно понимаешь. Ты хотел выпустить его, чтобы он смутил народ, над верой надругался и подвел народ под римские мечи. Но я, первосвященник иудейский, покуда жив, не дам на поругание веру и защищу народ. Ты слышишь, Пилат? Прислушайся, прокуратор. Неужели ты думаешь, что все это вызвал жалкий разбойник Вараван?
Время идет к полудню. Мы увлеклись беседою, а между тем надо продолжать. И огласить приговор.
In order not to get involved, the Roman power were also afraid of the Jews. There was a dual power then, because the Roman Empire captured these territories along with Judea and the Jews and Jerusalem. How is society governed?
Как управляется общество? Если давать
If you give a concept that pulls people to dobro, then society moves in this direction. And this is how a shift happens. The whole hump, together with the normal ones, so it is like they ride on this hump. Through this system of concepts, now the normal ones are already here. It is all moving. Such a process could be observed in the period somewhere from 1925 in our country, an active period, to 1953-1955. A most active movement of the entire society to the right. In many respects, not in all, of course. Either a gross mistake was made, or a misunderstanding, apparently a mistake. Alcohol and tobacco were advertised in the culture. Perhaps Stalin did not understand this, being a southern person, what alcohol is for northern peoples. The further north, the less protection against alcohol aggression at the level of genetics.
на уровне генетики. Есть такое вещество
There is a substance that neutralizes alcohol.
у южных народов.
So the southern peoples contain it more, but in the northern ones, the Chukchi completely go extinct there from alcohol.
Пропадают от алкоголя. У нас
We
тоже
too are a
есть
northern
южный
people.
народ. Вот, ну и табак.
Well, tobacco, he himself smoked.
Реклама алкоголя. Это
Advertising of alcohol and tobacco was in almost every Soviet film. And the goodies there, the good guys, drank and smoked.
чувство меры тоже.
A sense of measure was also not developed in normal people. That is, the upbringing was also wrong. According to certain basic parameters, new concepts were introduced, even with the help of Marxist-Leninist theory. And as the religious scholars of the Soviet period say, this religious obscurantism, after the times of Peter and even before the times of Peter the Great,
после петровских времен.
already in the Romanov Russia, it was very quickly overcome during the Soviet period of the Cultural Revolution.
Было преодолено в советский период.
It was called that in 1928, 1953, one generation.
1953 годы, одно поколение. За счет
Due to the fact that there was a sharp jump to the right,
скачок был вправо, появился
there appeared a new type of person.
советский человек,
He was called Soviet person.
и мы сейчас живем
And now we live in the potential of the not yet completely stolen moral potential of the people of the Soviet Union.
Советского Союза. Но в 90
But in the 1990s, it was the opposite. It cannot be said that the process was reversed. In the 90s, the 2000s,
сейчас только
now it is just beginning. You may have noticed, the fight against smoking has begun.
алкоголь хотят.
They want to raise the price of alcohol. Since people don't understand this, I mean, the normal people don't understand this. This can only come from over here.
Отсюда
From here, a new concept is introduced through culture.
через культуру. А культура это что?
And what is culture?
Информация.
Mass media mainly.
В основном
The internet now
сейчас
is what is given to
то,
us.
что нам дано. Это не только им.
It is not only given to them to send here any kind of pornography, pedophilia, and other things from Western sites.
Западных сайтов. Нас тоже хватает.
We also have enough laboratories, of course, these studios.
А в основном все оттуда.
But basically, it all comes from there.
Интернет можно
But you
заказать
can also download useful things on the internet.
через смену понятий.
Through the change of concepts, society moves forward.
Вперед.
It cannot be said that in the 1990s and 2000s we were moving backwards in all respects,
Но storm
but the slowdown of the process of movement towards truth and dobro began after the assassination of Stalin.
началось
In the 1960s, this became more active.
в 60-е
In the
годы.
1970s, it gained even more serious momentum. In the 1980s, the Soviet Union collapsed as a result, and now Russia is under the threat of
Под
collapse.
угрозой развала России. Но процессы идут, в общем-то, поступательно.
But many processes are generally progressive anyway, according to the law of time.
Я уже говорил.
I've already said this, I won't go back to it.
Вот, по сути,
So this is essentially the mechanism for governing society. The concept lays another measure in the human psyche.
меру закладывает другой.
According to this measure, person receives information, and then
Человек получает
what is laid down
информацию,
materializes in his behavior.
потом его то, что
The
заложено,
behavior of the whole society materializes.
поведение всего общества материализуется. То есть общество
That is,
живет
society
по-другому.
behaves
Это
differently.
только схема работает в
The scheme only works in a crowded elite society.
нормальный закон, только в обществе толпы.
This is a normal law only in a crowded elite society. If it had not been crowd elite, everything would have been different.
Нормальное в кавычках.
There would not be so many normal ones. Normal in quotation marks, of course, if objectively.
Доказательства
You can say that I'm saying all sorts of stuff about the normal,
нормальные. Ну,
but the proof is a complete dead end in the development of society further according to this culture. A complete dead end in all respects,
согласно этой культуре, полный тупик. По всем
in all priorities of generalized means of governance.
обобщенных средств управления. На всех
It can be shown on all priorities that society is self-destructing.
общество себя самоуничтожает.
There are also poems on this subject by two authors.
На эту тему.
One is the liberal
Один либерал,
Nikolai Gumilyov. He's from here.
отсюда. А
And the
второй
second is from
тот
here,
же
the same Chuchev.
И они говорят про
And they talk
понятия,
about
про
concepts,
слова.
about words.
Вот Гумилев.
So here are Gumilyov's verses. Quite interesting, really.
Николай Гумилев.
Nikolai Gumilyov,
Отец
this is the father of Lev Gumilyov, who wrote the theory of passionarity, and Akhmatova.
и Ахматовой. В
About the
онный
word.
день
On that day when over the new world God bowed his face, then the sun was stopped by the word cities were destroyed.
солнце
You see,
словом
the sun was stopped by the word.
Знаете как? Солнце останавливает
By the word, cities were destroyed.
города.
And the eagle did not flap his wings, the stars huddled in horror against the moon, when, like a pink flame, the word floated above. And for the low life, there were numbers.
А для низкой
Numbers
жизни
are given actually in the Kabbalah,
число даны как раз в Кабуле. Как
like
домашние
domestic
люди,
under-yoke cattle,
потому
because
что
all
все
shades of
смысла
meaning
у
the clever number transmits. The grey-haired patriarch took both good and evil into his
добро
dominion,
и зло, не решая
not daring to turn to sound. With a quill he drew a number in the sand,
пишущая
a writing quill, given in many scriptures. This is the magic wand.
палочка та самая. Через слово
Before there were no pens, there was a writing quill.
пишущая трость. Понятно? Он хорошо видел.
Apparently he knew the scriptures well.
Это вот так
This is the same magic wand through which society is governed, through concepts.
через понятие. Но забыли мы,
But we
что
forgot that
россияне
shining only a word amid earthly anxieties, and in the Gospel of John, the word is said to be God.
это тоже ложь.
This is also a lie.
Это не слово.
God is not the word.
Бог управляет
God governs
через
through the
слово.
word, through the triunity.
Слово это
The word is only a means, but God is not the word.
мы ему
We set him a
делом
limit, the meager limits of nature, and like bees in an empty hive,
делом дурно.
dead words smell foul.
Добрые слова.
This is from here.
Сейчас дурно.
Now all TV channels smell foul, 99%.
9%. Все, что
Everything below the belt and so on.
уже стали.
They even begin to kick them out.
Двоих изгнали из моих
2 were recently kicked off the program Mayak for mocking people.
людьми.
This has been going on for about 20 to 30 years now.
30 лет сейчас. Общество
Society is being pulled.
нормальное.
Now you can buy satellite dishes. There are more than 100 channels, and everything is the same.
И все одно и то же. Кроме
There are
есть
educational,
каналы,
however, channels,
каналы
animals, travel, and so on.
путешествий и прочее.
This is okay, but mostly it's entertainment channels.
Каналы, они... Вот. А
And now the
теперь
other
вот
one is from
вот
here.
отсюда. Тютчев.
Chuchev Fyodor Ivanovich,
Теперь
Russian.
тебе не до стихов.
Now you're not up to poetry, our own beloved Russian word. The harvest is ripe, the reaper is ready, the non-earthly time has come. That is from God. This one was from Satan, the one before, that dead words smell foul. The lie was embodied in damask steel by some godly grace, not the whole world, but the whole of hell, threatens with destruction all blasphemous minds, all godless peoples. Kingdoms of darkness have risen from the bottom in the name of light and freedom. They prepare captivity for you. They prophesy shame to you. You of the better future times, the verb and life and enlightenment. Oh, in this severe test, in the last, in the fatal struggle, do not betray yourself and justify yourself to God.
Эти какие разные стихи.
See what different verses.
То есть
That is, people understood and expressed this,
выражали это,
but there was no such concept apparatus that I am giving you now.
его не было.
Only a small part, in order to express what a person needs in
Для
general.
того, чтобы выразить, что вообще необходимо человеку. И
And, in essence,
один
one ended badly.
его
He was shot,
стреляли или
generally executed, in the 20s or 30s.
30-е годы. А
And this one lived a good life and died a natural death. This is Chuchev.
Тютчев. Нравственность
Nraviousness,
тоже
also simplified. It is
непосредственно
directly connected, of course, with worldview.
Нравственность
Nraviousness.
это взаимное соответствие
This is a mutual correspondence between the phenomenon that a person encounters and the evaluations of this phenomenon. good, bad, non-determined, of no significance, it's all the same to me, and so forth. Nraviousness is the mutual correspondence that exists in the human psyche between what a person encounters in life and the evaluations of this. Good, bad, not determined. These are the main evaluations. But there can be a lot of evaluations. If everything is basically non-determined or is of no significance, then this is nravlessness. If there's a lot of non-determinedness, then this is nravlessness. Well, not a hoot is given. It's all the same one way or the other. Now, there are many nravless people. You ask, how do you relate to this or that? What do you feel about it? I don't know, they say. This is nravlessness. And nravius has no shades, a good person or a bad one. Nravlessness, this is bad. A person does not have the right not to have an opinion on the necessary set of phenomena. Nravlessness is bad. But just the concept of nraviousness by itself, it is just a general name. Well, either nraviousness is a set of internal measures of a person, which is these evaluations. Naturally, nraviousness also takes shape in life from birth, the same as the worldview, from parents, the totality of a person's nravious measures, particular nravious measures in relation to these or those phenomena. If there are no nravious standards, as it were, that is non-determined, then this is still an evaluation. This is how it works. Nravlessness is when there has taken shape in the psyche non-determinedness in relation to most phenomena, or it is of no significance. I do not need it. It does not matter. You often hear this. I don't need it. So that means that there are already problems. And then already nraviousness is divided into evil nraviousness, objectively, that is, in accordance with this picture. Evil nraviousness, a person is not a criminal, but an evildoer, objectively, according to the objective criteria given from above. An evildoer means he has evil nerves. And dobro nraviousness. And this is already with evaluations. But again, the criteria should be objective and not some subjective invented by the people themselves. This component of the psyche is nraviousness. We will continue to go through the components when we have the topic human psychology. To all appearances, this will be next time. It governs everything else in the human psyche and his behavior, and sets the worldview. Nraviousness is the main component in the human psyche. This set of nravious standards is laid down from childhood, and it governs everything else, in behavior, in psychic activity, and health and everything else. The more blagonravious the person, the more dobronravious he is, the more support he has from above. The absolute pravious man has the full support from above, as it was in the case with Jesus Christ. Therefore, God could not give him to be punished by the Roman power. This fable entered the New Testament, artificially created by the owners of the New Testament, in order to later shepherd people with the help of another God. Also a separate theme. We have it described. Why? Why it was necessary. God also does not apply any repression against the evil nravious. He simply refuses to help them. Everything else that happens to them, it is they who stumble upon such evil and obvious people in society. But this doesn't come from God. God forbade himself violence against anyone, either in this life or in the next, as you can understand. The Quran says that he is merciful and beneficent, but of course there is some confusion. In any case, each chapter in the Quran begins with a spell in the name of God, the merciful, the beneficent. You cannot act like a Gestapo man or something else in relation to people. He either supports dobro or he does not support evil, supports dobro and does not support evil. And this is confirmed in the same Quran. Another concept, it is called distinction. Well, in general, it boils down to what is said. God supports with distinction those who understand what is dobro and evil and follow only dobro, and does not support those who do not understand at all. Third chapter. It is not the purpose of God to leave you in your present state till he shall separate the wicked from the good. The Quran is written in a special verse, which in general protects this book from distortion and forgery. There, one and the same thing is repeated many times in many chapters. One and the same thing is simply repeated in different words. That is, it all comes down to the fact that God helps those who do dobro and listen to him through the language of life in the main. God speaks to man through the language of life. This is also a very serious theme. Moreover, God speaks to everyone in a language that he not only can understand, but which he must understand in his own inner language. Well, not only, through other people he can address you, through some phenomena, and so on and so forth. The being of God is not a matter of faith. This is the subject of incessantly confirmed by God in life dialogue with a person, knowledge that is showing and not proving in the character of its origin, if correlated with the methods of developing knowledge in the culture of mankind. God gives proof of his being to man on faith, and not on reason. The proof of the being of God is, in its essence, of a obvious ethical character, and consists in the fact that the Most High answers the prayer of the one who believes him by the fact that the circumstances of his life change according to the meaning of his prayers, the more vividly and clearly, the more he himself is obviously pravious and responsive to God when God addresses him personally through his sovest, the innermost inner world, through other people, through monuments of culture, or in some other way in the language of life signs. God always answers sincere, meaningful prayer, even if there are no changes in life circumstances in accordance with its meaning. Then this or that answer is given as to the question why. In this dialogue, the reason of the individual only comprehends what is given from above, introducing it into the system of his world understanding, changing his praviousness and worldview in the direction of objective praviousness or in the direction of further deviation from it. In fact, the proofs of the being of God, given by him to anyone who asks, confirm the Quranic promise. And when my servants question thee concerning me, then surely I am nigh. I answer the prayer of the suppliant when he crieth unto me, so let them hear my call, and let them trust in me, in order that they may be led aright. Quran 2:186. Maybe some of you have had a feeling, especially in childhood, it was bright, that someone addressed you with something, just a feeling. But it remained in the memory, or something was erased but some trace remained. Especially in childhood, when a person, his psyche, is not occupied by the culture that is now. And this especially happens before the appearance of sexual desire, the first 7 to 10 years of life. And then the sexual instincts dominate the behavior for a very long time and interfere. But this is also a question of human psychology. More on that later. Therefore, distinction is necessary information that provides security in life. Additional information, that is, even if a person has a sense of measure, if he is absolutely decent, nonetheless he can miss something in life and do something wrong. If he is decent and the sense of measure is lacking, then more additional information is given directly from above. It can be given as an epiphany, it can be given through some person standing nearby, for example, or through a telephone and a call, other things, through the language of life, so that a person does the right thing at the right time. But this is given only to the pravyas, to those who do dobro. And to those who do evil, this is not given. Thus, God intervenes in people's lives and governs them, mainly through distinction. Sometimes, as a rule, it is one bit of information. When you make a decision, and if you govern yourself, or are engaged in governance, you are constantly in the process of making decisions on particular issues, and sometimes not to make them. But if you are doing something socially useful from the point of view of God, then He helps. He can give one bit of information, yes or no, do so or otherwise. One bit of information somehow comes, through a phone call, maybe through some kind of meeting, simply through an epiphany that I'll do this, then it turns out that this is correct. If you are mistaken and did not notice this, then there will be another opportunity to return to this issue at a new stage of development after some time. That is, it is allowed to make mistakes from above, but not out of evil intent, but out of inattention, not because the psyche has developed imperfectly and so on. You can make mistakes, but you can't do it evil intentionally. Therefore, there are in general two types of errors that lead to catastrophes. In general, one of them is Satanism. Satanism is a deliberate act against the will of God. If a person knows that this is bad and he does it, and even more so, governs society, pulls it to the left, then this is Satanism, deliberately. If not deliberately, it's not Satanism, it's just mistakes. More on that later too. Are there any questions? Again, in all scriptures, especially the Bible and the Quran, the New Testament, there are doctrines that are completely inconsistent with what really comes from God. This is the doctrine of retribution, both in this life and in the next. God does not punish anyone. He said how one should live, what is best, and there are certain rules. If a person gets into some kind of catastrophe, into some trouble, it doesn't come from God, but from people themselves. When they get punched in the mug, God has nothing to do with this, because one ran into the other, or vice versa, something like that. And help is given only in what God considers best. Therefore, the doctrine attributed to Jesus Christ, His life, as it were, according to the New Testament, is, unfortunately, a fiction and a lie.
Так это ты подговаривал народ разрушить Иерушалаимский храм?
Я, Егемон, никогда в жизни не собирался разрушать здание храма и никого не подговаривал на это бессмысленное действие.
Записано ясно. подговаривал разрушить храм. Так свидетельствуют люди.
Эти добрые люди, Гемон, ничему не учились и все перепутали, что я говорил. Я вообще начинаю опасаться, что эта путаница будет продолжаться очень долгое время.
Religious systems have a certain classification. First of all, they are divided into modern and dead systems. Those that are no longer relevant, at least at the level of some states and civilizations, are gone, although they still exert an impact on people. And modern ones. This is basically what we will have time to cover here just a little. Mostly Judaism, Christianity, Islam, maybe a little from the East. The second variety of religious systems, they are divided into natural, those that arose without the intervention of a founder or prophets, and the religions of revelations. Again, we will only touch on the natural ones a little. I actually already said a little about this. As an example, these are shamanism, fetishism, animism, ancient magic, totemism, and so on. I already talked about these at the beginning. But religions of revelations are those that have arisen under the impact of some person. They are considered prophets, messengers, and so on. Well, here it should be recalled that all the prophets, as it is said in the Quran, Abraham, Isaac, Ismail, Jesus, Moses, Muhammad, they were given one and the same thing from above. Providence is one, God is one. Therefore, naturally, one and the same thing was given. And if we analyze the religions of revelation, then, in principle, the algorithm for the formation of religions of revelation is approximately the same. First is the appearance of an inspired, let's call him for brevity, prophet. In different periods, prophets appeared in different parts of the globe. They are considered Moses, Buddha, Lao Tzu, Zarathustra in Persian civilization. A lot of things have gone from Persian civilization, also a separate issue. And a lot came into Christianity from the Persians. Then Jesus, Muhammad. The appearance of the prophet, who begins to broadcast. The second is oral sermons. The second stage, chronologically, the algorithm for the formation of a particular religious system, how it happens. The third is the formation of a group of students. Well, in Christianity, this is basically the apostles. Further, the joint life of a group of students and a teacher of some duration. It can be different. It happens for almost all religions of revelation. Fifth, the departure of the teacher. Basically, this will either be death or departure to another world. The next is the formation of the first religious community. Next the establishment of a religious cult. Then comes the emergence of an organization, a religious organization. Well, in the ninth, is the functioning of the religious organization and the emergence of means of protecting it from external invasion and from internal enemies. There are also types of religious organizations. I will not give them. In any case, in the end, a very large religious organization appears, a community, then more types, and a church. In Christianity, this is the church. So these are the stages. Few people think about them. But in principle, at some stage, in any case, here, the teacher's departure to another world, the direct connection between the teacher and the students is interrupted. This can be seen in the example of Christianity, most clearly expressed in what is written in the New Testament on the example of Christianity. There were students, disciples. One of the disciples betrayed Jesus Christ. This is known. Apparently it is no coincidence that his name is Judas, consonant with Judaism. They organized it in such a way so that the Jews and Christians would never fully reconcile, although the book is one and the same. The Orthodox Bible is the Jewish scripture and the New Testament. But there exists also a trend, a very serious one among Christians, which does not recognize the God-inspiredness of the Old Testament, because the Jews crucified Christ, and Judas betrayed him. That's how it happened. The teacher goes to another world. Even if we take the New Testament, look at the history of Jesus Christ, then the last day before the execution, when Jesus said, "I will be arrested tomorrow, pray with me." He selected 3 disciples, apparently the most capable of the apostles. He says, "Pray with me. In no case sleep in the Garden of Gethsemane." This was before the arrest and subsequent events. But they fell asleep 3 times and overslept in general everything that they needed to know. And there are a number of episodes when they admire there what is called the transfiguration of the Lord and so on, from which we can conclude that the apostles did not understand the teachings of Christ. None of them. One fell into cowardice there, the apostle Peter. Another betrayed, Judas. And the rest did not understand the teachings of Christ. Therefore, at this stage already, if we remove Christianity up to the 5th point, this is the teaching of Jesus, the first variety of Christianity, and then the teaching of the apostles already comes. This is the second variety of Christianity. And so it is with all the prophets, and with the vast majority of sacred books. Yes, the prophets were given one and the same thing from above, maybe in different languages, in different terminology, but at this stage, starting from the 6th point, because they did not understand, even living together, what he wanted in general. From this stage, distortion begins, subjective, of course. Because, as the apostles understood, so they wrote it down. Jesus never wrote anything. Moses, although he is credited with writing some Torah scrolls, being in the desert for the first 2 years with his brother, most likely never wrote anything either. Of course, Moses was educated in Pharaoh's palace. Jesus was also literate. But there is no gospel of Jesus. There is the gospel of Matthew, of Mark, of John, Luke, but there is no gospel from Jesus. We have it. I have it in my briefcase, but it didn't get into the canons. It appeared only in the 20th century. They say there were 600 gospels somewhere. 4 of them were selected. The second variety of Christianity is the Christianity of the apostles themselves. It is a completely different thing. It is actually this that Mikhail Afanasyevich Bulgakov noted in the Master and Margarita. The Master and Margarita is also a gospel of the Russian Mikhail. There is the story of Jesus Christ. It doesn't fit in with the New Testament. And there are several significant moments in this gospel, which is built into the novel The Master and Margarita. The first significant moment. This is the fact that there was no execution. At the end, it says that there was no execution. In 2 places, one has a dream, the second is also there, Ivan Бездомный and someone else, and it says there was no execution.
Какая пошлая казнь. Но ты мне, пожалуйста, скажи, ведь ее не было. Молю тебя, скажи. Не было.
Ну, конечно, не было. Тебе померещилось.
И ты можешь поклясться в этом?
Клянусь.
Больше мне ничего не нужно.
Moreover, the source is Jesus himself, or Yeshua in Hebrew. Jesus is apparently in Greek and Hebrew Yeshua. Bulgakov took the Hebrew name. The second significant moment is that the New Testament is in general rubbish from the apostles. When Jesus gets, or Yeshua, ends up in front of Pontius Pilate, having been arrested, he asks him, "Do you know, someone there was following you?" I don't remember verbatim. He says, "Yes, there is one who follows me with goat parchment and constantly writes." I looked at his parchment and was horrified. I had never said anything like that. I begged him, for God's sake, burn this parchment, but he tore it out of my hands and ran away. "Who is that?" he asks. "Matthew Levi."
Эти добрые люди, Гимон, ничему не учились и все перепутали, что я говорил. Я вообще начинаю опасаться, что эта путаница будет продолжаться очень долгое время. И все из-за того, что он неверно записывает за мной.
За тобой записано достаточно, чтобы тебя повесить.
Нет, Эгемон, ходит один с козлиным пергаментом и непрерывно пишет. Но я однажды заглянул в этот пергамент и ужаснулся. Решительно ничего из того, что там написано, я не говорил. Я его умолял, сожги ты, ради Бога, свой пергамент. А он выхватил у меня его из рук и убежал.
Кто такой?
Левий Матвей, он был сборщиком податей.
Well, a hint at the Gospel of Matthew, which opens exactly the New Testament. Bulgakov knew, of course, the sacred books, and apparently he knew the Quran. But there are still a number of moments in the Master and Margarita that Jesus was an ordinary person. I don't remember my parents, he says, and so on and so forth. So this tells us, I looked and I was horrified, I never said anything like that. This is a hint at the New Testament, at the main Gospels. Well, the Quran also confirms the version that there was no execution. The third variety of Christianity is already the 4th century CE, when this religion of monotheism was tested on slaves in the Roman Empire. This is when there was polytheism there, but this was inconvenient to govern a vast empire. What was needed was the concentration of spiritual governance in a single center. They decided that they needed to change all polytheism to one God. But here there is very great popularity among the Jews. It came from Jerusalem, of the mission of Christ. From him they took and made a God. Well, and after that they needed holy scriptures. And so from 325 to the end of the 4th century, the New Testament was approved. This sacred scripture, it was finally adopted already in that edition, if I'm not mistaken, 385, at the next ecumenical council. This is the third variety of Christianity, canonical, already illuminated by priests and already accepted at the level of Emperor Constantine. Moreover, as to whether Jesus is God or not, disputes have been going on for 3 or 4 centuries. Arguments went on and did not finish. By the time of the Ecumenical Council in 325, they decided to vote whether to recognize Jesus Christ as God or not, or he was simply one of the prophets, some Jewish Messiah. Well, they recognized him, they voted, a command was given through the hierarchy of global Jretzes to Emperor Constantine. He himself, to the end of his life, professed Yazychestvo for himself. He was even the supreme Jretz of the Invincible Son. The Egyptian title was given to him, as it was to Alexander the Great. There was Greek civilization before him. And then he ordered by his decree to destroy all the gods and introduce the culture of monotheism. This is the 4th century already. This is the third variety of Christianity. Well, about the same story, only with its own peculiarities, is also with Moses. Pushkin has a very interesting work. It is also about the New Testament. It is called Gavriliad, also about the New Testament. It shows that God and Satan and people took part in the formation of the New Testament in the person of Mary, who gave birth to Christ. The priests did not like it very much at the time. Pushkin was almost jailed. But its true was anonymous. The Tsar called Pushkin to him and asked, "Was it you who wrote this?" There are these words. With the story of Moses, I'll not match my own one. By tall tales he conceived to imprison the Jewry. He lied with high standing and they listened to him. With silver tongue blessed with submissive mind, Moses' name went far and went wide. But I am no historian of the court, and by no prophet's rank will I be bought. That is, Pushkin called the story of Moses, that is the Old Testament, a lie that seduces the Jews. Moses didn't say anything like that either. This is the mystery as to why all the prophets were given one and the same thing, and we are at war. The difference in the scriptures and traditions. To restore the truth, it is taken from the sense of measure. What is good and what is bad? Practice is the criterion of truth. In practice, of course, you can eat your fill of all sorts of rubbish, make sure that it's bad, and refuse it. And some do not give up rubbish all their lives. They smoke, drink, and so on. Then, by the age of 40, incurable diseases begin, because the number of vessels in the organism is limited. And all this rubbish destroys the necessary supply of vessels given from above. And diseases begin, heart attacks, strokes, and so on. And those who have a lot of sex have other problems too. But the worst thing is that it all affects the younger generation. Therefore, we are now losing the genetically healthy core of the nation. Not only in our country, it is in all nations. Ours is also decreasing. Basically, this is drunkenness, tobacco. There are different drugs now. And fornication. Basically, fornication, of course, the most dangerous is among the female population. This is the most dangerous. But this doesn't mean that the go-ahead is given to debauchery among men. But the mother's health is impacted to a greater extent by the mother, both spiritual and physical. In Islam, there is a slightly different picture. But the most important thing is that little time passed from the death of the Prophet to the formation of the Holy Scripture. But the most important thing is that none of the prophets, not one of them, not recorded anywhere, bequeathed after himself to collect something into a Holy Scripture. Russians have no scripture. This information that I am giving you is useless in the West, even in the Baltic states. Complete zero. They don't understand this. There, everything is either a book or nothing. There is no other truth. Well, either nravlessness, that I don't give a hoot, it's all the same to me, I don't need it. And here with us, as soon as Pushkin appeared before anyone else, because he knew French, he read the Bible in French and the Quran too. He even has a poem, Imitations of the Quran it's called, and he wasn't in church. Basically, his creativity is aimed at, just like with Chuchev, at revealing the truth and showing it. There are such direct things that say that the story of Moses is a fiction. The Old Testament, basically. Although there are books in the Old Testament that are very interesting, there are such things that they confirm, almost at the level of the prophets, that there was no execution, that is, there will not be one. The prophecy that there will be no execution. Some say it will happen, others say it won't, but this is also a separate theme. It is interesting that basically everyone who committed some kind of bad actions against the previous from biblical characters, not only, they ended badly. They had their heads cut off, they were executed, and so on. The Apostle Paul was executed, which is basically the New Testament. The second part of it is basically the Apostle Paul, his message in the 63rd year of the New Era. Also there, John the Baptist, who was a relative of Jesus Christ, and directed him along the path that was written in the New Testament in advance. After me will come the one who sacrifices himself for the sake of... Well, they cut his head off and presented it to King Herod. There is a picture where the head of John the Baptist is brought on a dish. This is the one that led Jesus Christ the wrong way. So he was one of these. They are internally evildoers. Jews too, of course. And so on. There are episodes of the Old Testament. That is, their life was cut short by a certain mechanism. One was executed by a king, the other there too by the Roman authorities, by a certain mechanism, when they had already exhausted the allowance given to them from above. But with regard to Jesus, there is a lot of evidence that there was no execution. Moreover, the Templars, The Templars are the initiates who guarded the power of the Pope in the Middle Ages. They knew that the story about Jesus Christ is for the crowd mainly. They laughed at the Christians, although they themselves guarded the throne. Such were the initiates. If God the Most High is love, then He is love for Jesus. And there is nothing and no one in creation that would not allow the Most High God to answer the prayer of Christ in the Garden of Gethsemane in full accordance with its well-known meaning. For the ungodly said, reasoning with themselves, but not aright, our life is short and tedious, and in the death of a man there is no remedy, neither was there any man to have returned from the grave. For we are born at all adventure, and we shall be hereafter as though we had never been. For the breath in our nostrils is as smoke, and a little spark in the moving of our heart, which, being extinguished, our body shall be turned into ashes, and our spirit shall vanish as the soft air, and our name shall be forgotten in time, and no man shall have our works in remembrance, and our life shall pass away as the trace of a cloud, and shall be dispersed as a mist that is driven away with the beams of the sun, and overcome with the heat thereof. For our time is a very shadow that passeth away, and after our end there is no returning, for it is fast sealed that no man cometh again. Come on therefore, let us enjoy the good things that are present, and let us speedily use the creatures like as in youth. Let us fill ourselves with costly wine and ointments, and let no flower of the spring pass by us. Let us crown ourselves with rosebuds, before they be withered. Let none of us go without his part of our voluptuousness. Let us leave tokens of our joyfulness in every place. For this is our portion, and our lot is this. Let us oppress the poor righteous man. Let us not spare the widow, nor reverence the grey hairs of the aged. Let our strength be the law of justice, for that which is feeble is found to be nothing worth. Therefore let us lie in wait for the righteous, because he is not for our turn, and he is clean contrary to our doings. He upbraideth us with our offending the law, and objecteth to our infamy, the transgressings of our education. He professeth to have the knowledge of God, and he calleth himself the child of the Lord. He was made to reprove our thoughts. He is grievous unto us even to behold. For his life is not like other men's, his ways are of another fashion. We are esteemed of him as counterfeits. He abstaineth from our ways as from filthiness. He pronounceth the end of the just to be blessed, and maketh his boast that God is his Father. Let us see if his words be true, and let us prove what shall happen in the end of him. For if the just man be the Son of God, he will help him, and deliver him from the hand of his enemies. Let us examine him with despitefulness and torture, that we may know his meekness, and prove his patience. Let us condemn him with a shameful death, for by his own saying he shall be respected. After these words of the ungodly wicked, Solomon reports the consequences of their encroachment on the life of Christ. Such things did they imagine, and they were deceived, for their own wickedness hath blinded them. As for the mysteries of God, they knew them not. Neither hoped they for the wages of righteousness, nor discerned a reward for blameless souls. For God created man to be immortal, and made him to be an image of his own eternity. Nevertheless, through envy of the devil came death into the world, and they that do hold of his side do find it. Also on the fact that there was no execution of Christ, we read in the Quran, Surah 4, 157, 159. They slew him not, nor crucified him, but it appeared so unto them. And lo, those who disagree concerning it, that is, disagree with the Quranic words, are in doubt thereof. They have no knowledge thereof, save pursuit of a conjecture. They slew him not for certain, but God took him up unto himself. God was ever mighty, wise. There is not one of the people of the Scripture but will believe in him before his death, and on the day of resurrection he will be a witness against them. Dobro is always concrete. There is no abstract dobro. Abstract humanism is a means of destroying society.
конкретный гуманизм или
Concrete humanism or philanthropy
наоборот.
is the opposite.
Вот. Ну, эту тему
Well, this
я-
theme is already about what the status of a human is.
такой статус.
We will continue this next time.
В следующий раз.
For today, that's all.
На сегодня
Until
всё.
next time.
Да? До следующего раза. До свидания.